They thought I was just the quiet new girl, hair tied back and eyes always down. They didn't know I was once Michigan's youngest junior MMA champion. My name is Lena Tran. I promised my mom I'd hide my strength to start fresh to live a normal life. But when Derek Collins poured hot soup all over me in the cafeteria, and when Troy Miller and his friends harassed girls at the bus stop, I realized silence only feeds monsters. I never wanted to fight, but if the choice is between fear and doing what's right, I know which one I'll choose. They call me Lena Tran, 16 years old, 5'2" with dark brown hair tied back by an old black elastic band I always keep wrapped around my wrist. I'm not particularly pretty, not striking in any way. I just exist. Or at least that's how I want people to see me. That morning I walked through the gates of Lincoln High with my faded backpack worn out Converse and eyes fixed firmly on the ground. The small town of Maplewood was covered in such thick fog it felt like the world itself was trying to hide. Maybe I was like that too, hiding myself, hiding my past. My family had just moved here from Detroit after my mom got a job at the local hospital. She kept saying Maplewood would be a fresh start, a safer place, somewhere I could live like a normal teenage girl. But deep down, I knew that normal wasn't something I'd ever been granted. This was my fourth school in 3 years. Each time I learned new ways to avoid attention walk, quickly sit in the corners, never hold eye contact too long, always say yes or sure when spoken to. New uniforms, new hallways, new names to memorize, all of it was easier than trying to remember who I really was. If you asked what I liked, I'd say literature. If you asked what I did after school, I'd tell you read or listen to music. But the truth was, for the past 4 years, I'd spent nearly every free hour in a gritty MMA gym in Detroit. I learned how to kick, punch, grapple, choke, break free, and most importantly, I learned how to control my anger. But no one here knew that. No one knew I had once stood in the cage under blinding lights holding the Michigan Junior Champion belt, beating fighters twice my size. No one knew each punch I threw was powerful enough to crack a rib if I wanted to. In Maplewood, I was just the Asian girl who moved here from Detroit. I had sworn to my mom, the only person in the world who truly knew me, that this time I wouldn't let anyone find out. I'd be an ordinary Lena Tran, a quiet girl no one remembered, a shadow. But what I didn't know was that on that first morning walking through the gates of Lincoln High, fate had already decided my secrets wouldn't stay hidden for long. And it all began with a mocking laugh echoing at the end of the hallway. I heard it before I saw them, that low, arrogant chuckle echoing off the blue lockers like nails scraping against glass. I didn't need to look up to know it was directed at me. "Hey, new girl." His voice was sharp-edged with something cruel. Slowly I raised my eyes and saw him leaning against the locker across from mine. Derek Collins. Even before anyone told me his name, I already knew who he was. You could tell by the way other students parted around him in the hallway, how his friends lingered behind him like shadows. He had that smug confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. "Yeah, I'm talking to you." He pushed himself off the locker and walked over, his heavy black boots thudding against the linoleum floor. Up close, he smelled faintly of mint gum and cheap cologne. His blonde hair was cropped short, framing a square jaw and cold gray eyes that studied me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. I swallowed hard and forced myself to breathe evenly. "Hi." He tilted his head, smiling like a predator. "What's your name, Lena?" "Lena Tran. Detroit, right." His lips curled. "Figures. Another city girl thinking she's better than the rest of us?" I shook my head quickly. "No, I'm not. I don't think that." He chuckled again, louder this time so his friends could hear. Two of them, one wiry with narrow eyes, the other taller with a permanent smirk, laughed along. "See, boys, she doesn't think." Heat rose up my neck, but I kept my gaze down. I could feel students slowing in the hallway, curious eyes darting over. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Derek stepped closer, invading my space, his breath warm against my cheek. "Listen, newbie," he drawled softly, almost gently, but there was venom beneath his words. "This school has rules. You want to get by here without trouble, it costs $5 a day." I blinked. $5. For what? He smiled wider. For protection. You see, anything can happen to a lonely little girl from Detroit. I felt something clench deep inside my chest. A familiar feeling. That old dark anger curling up from my stomach, spreading heat through my veins. But I forced it down, locking it tight behind ribs in discipline. Master Johnson always said, "You can't throw a punch with a clouded mind." "I'll think about it," I said quietly. "Good girl." He patted my cheek lightly, his fingers cold and heavy. "But don't think too long. You've got until tomorrow." He winked, then turned to his friends. "Come on, boys. Let's leave her to her deep thoughts." They walked away, laughing, their shadows stretching down the emptying hallway. I stood there for a moment, staring at the floor, my fists curled so tight my nails bit into my palms. I felt my pulse thrumming with something dangerously close to fury. That was my first real introduction to Lincoln High. $5 a day to survive. But in that moment, I didn't feel fear. I felt something else entirely. A quiet, cold voice whispering inside me. They have no idea who they're dealing with. That night, I lay in bed staring at the cracks in the ceiling. Each shadow looked like a spider's web, thin and fragile, ready to tear at the slightest touch. I thought about Derek Collins, his cold gray eyes, his mocking smile, his fingers brushing against my cheek like I was some pet to be owned. In Detroit, if someone like him had tried that with me, it would have ended differently. There, everyone knew better. My fists spoke a language of their own. Even the older boys at the gym learned to keep their distance after I'd dropped one of them with a single liver shot during sparring. But here I'd promised Mom. "Please, Lena," she'd whispered the night we packed up the last boxes in Detroit. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with dark circles from endless hospital shifts. "Just, let's start fresh this time. No fights, no trouble. Be a normal girl, okay? For me." I remember nodding, forcing a smile, even though my chest burned with something heavy and bitter. I'd said yes because I couldn't bear to see that worry in her eyes again. Normal? I didn't even know what that word meant anymore. I rolled over in bed and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. My fingers hovered over the contact list before pressing Master Johnson. He picked up after 2 rings. His deep voice always brought a strange calm to my nerves. "Lena, how's the new school?" I closed my eyes, breathing out shakily. "It's complicated. Tell me." So I did. I told him about Derek, about the $5, about how he looked at me like I was nothing. When I finished, silence hummed on the other end of the line. "Do you remember what I taught you?" he asked quietly. I swallowed. "Never fight with anger. Always with control." That's right. And what else? I hesitated, feeling tears prick my eyes despite how hard I tried to hold them back. Strength is not about proving you can hurt someone. It's about knowing when not to. "Good girl," he said softly. "But remember, Lena, some people only understand force. If you keep tolerating them, they'll only become bolder. Even a tiger must show its teeth sometimes." I let his words sink in. My chest tightened around my heart, squeezing until I could barely breathe. "Thank you, Master," I whispered. "Call me anytime," he replied, and the line clicked off. I lay there in the dark, phone pressed against my chest, listening to my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Mom wanted me to be normal. Master Johnson wanted me to stand up for myself. But what did I want? I wanted to keep my promise to her. I really did, but deep inside, under the layers of discipline and obedience, there was a quiet, coiled anger growing by the hour. Because I knew people like Derek Collins. I knew exactly what would happen if I paid him tomorrow. It would never stop. But still, as sleep finally dragged me under, one thought pulsed in my mind like a dying star. Please let me be normal. Just this once. The next morning, the fog over Maplewood was so thick I could barely see the houses across the street. It felt like the world was hiding from itself. Maybe that's why I found the courage to do what I did next. I left home early, telling Mom I wanted to review my schedule before homeroom. In reality, I needed space to think. I walked slowly down Oak Ridge Avenue, my breath fogging in the cold air, the straps of my backpack biting into my shoulders. I didn't go straight to school. Instead, I turned right at the gas station and walked another 3 blocks to a small park. There was a cracked wooden bench near an old oak tree where no one ever sat this early in the morning. I pulled out my phone again. My fingers hovered over Master Johnson's contact, hesitating. Part of me felt weak for calling him twice in 2 days. But another part, the part that still felt like the 12-year-old girl stepping into his gym for the first time, knew I needed his voice. He picked up almost immediately this time. "Lena." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just listened to the background sounds, the distant echo of punching bags, leather striking leather coaches shouting commands. It felt like home, like safety. "Master." I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do. Tell me." And so I told him everything. About the promise to my mother, about Derek, about the anger crawling under my skin like fire ants, about how badly I wanted to stay invisible to keep my head down and be normal, but how impossible that felt now. When I finished, he didn't speak right away. I imagined him sitting at his desk in the back office, leaning back in his squeaky leather chair, his thick arms, crossed brows drawn together the way they always were when he was thinking deeply. "Lena," he said finally, his voice low and calm, "why did you start training with me 4 years ago?" I blinked, surprised by the question. Because I was tired of being afraid." "That's right. You didn't come to me to learn how to hurt people. You came to me to learn how to live without fear." His voice softened. "Your mother wants to protect you. I understand that. But you know better than anyone that hiding your strength doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps everyone else comfortable." I felt my throat tighten painfully. "But remember this, Lena," he continued. "If you decide to act, do it smart. Never in anger, never to show off, and never cause more harm than necessary. Your strength is not just in your fists, it's in your control. Understand?" I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I understand." "You are my best student," he said, his voice firm now. "Whatever you decide to do, I trust you to do it right." A tear slipped down my cheek, cold against my skin. "Thank you, Master." "Now go," he said, "and Lena, don't forget who you are." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, watching the fog begin to lift the pale morning sun burning through in thin golden shafts. I felt something shift inside me then, a quiet resolve settling deep into my bones. Because Master Johnson was right, Mom wanted to protect me, but he had taught me how to protect myself, and I knew deep down that it was only a matter of time before I had to show Derek Collins exactly who I really was. The rest of the school day passed in a blur. I barely heard the teachers' voices. I couldn't remember what we read in English or what formulas we learned in algebra. All I could think about was what would happen at lunch. At 12:15, the bell rang. I walked into the cafeteria, gripping my tray so tightly my knuckles turned white. My eyes darted around, scanning for him. And there he was, Derek Collins, sitting with his friends at their usual table near the windows, surrounded by football players and cheerleaders. He was laughing at something Kyle said, his gray eyes glinting with amusement, his wide shoulders shaking as he leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. I swallowed hard and walked to the corner table by the vending machines, the same place I sat yesterday. My heart thundered so loudly it felt like it echoed off the walls. I just wanted to eat in peace, to disappear, to keep my promise to Mom. But fate doesn't care about your promises. A few minutes later, I felt his shadow before I saw him. The cafeteria chatter died down like someone had pressed mute. "Hey there, city girl," Derek drawled, sliding into the seat across from me. His friends flanked him on either side, smirking. "Did you bring my money?" I looked up at him slowly. His smirk widened as he leaned forward, elbows on the table. "No," I said quietly. The smile faded from his face. Around us, students watched silently, waiting. "What did you say?" I said no. For a second, he just stared at me, blinking as if he couldn't quite believe it. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was sharp, cruel, the kind that made your skin crawl. "You know what, babe?" he said, his voice dripping mock sympathy. "I was hoping you'd be smart about this. But if you want to play the heroine," he shrugged casually. "Okay, let's play." And before I could react, he reached over, grabbed my tray, and dumped the entire contents into my lap. Hot soup and soggy vegetables soaked through my jeans, dripping onto the floor. Gasps and muffled laughter erupted around us like popping corn. "Oops," he said with mock concern. "Look what you did to yourself." I sat frozen, staring down at the mess in my lap, feeling the heat seep into my skin. Rage burned so hot inside me, it felt like fire licking up my ribs. "Why are you just sitting there?" Derek sneered. "Clean it up, princess." Slowly, I stood up. The laughter around us grew louder. Soup dripped off my jeans, leaving wet splatters on the tiles. My hands were trembling, not with fear, but with the effort it took to hold myself back. I looked at Derek, straight into his cold gray eyes. "You made a big mistake," I whispered. He blinked, then snorted. "What are you going to do? Tell the principal. Call Mommy." I didn't answer. I just picked up my backpack, turned, and walked out of the cafeteria without another word. Behind me, the sound of laughter and Derek's mocking voice followed me down the hall like a pack of jackals. In the bathroom, I tried to wash off the soup, scrubbing my jeans until my fingers ached. My reflection in the cracked mirror stared back at me with calm, steady eyes. For the first time in a long while, I didn't look like the quiet, invisible girl I'd tried so hard to become. I looked like myself. That evening, I didn't tell Mom what happened. I helped her chop vegetables for dinner, listened to her stories about her first week at the hospital, and forced a smile when she kissed my forehead before bed. But as I lay awake, staring into the dark, Master Johnson's words echoed in my mind. "Your strength is not just in your fists, it's in your control." And I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I would show Derek Collins exactly who I was. The next morning, the sky over Maplewood was steel gray, heavy with unfallen rain. I woke up before my alarm, my stomach knotted with quiet determination. I dressed in my usual jeans and black hoodie, tying my hair into a tight ponytail. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw not the frightened new girl from yesterday, but the Lena Tran I thought I'd left behind in Detroit. When I arrived at school, Derek and his friends were waiting by the lockers. As soon as they saw me, they exchanged smirks like hyenas scenting blood. "Well, well," Derek drawled, pushing himself off the lockers to stand in front of me. "Look who's here." "Did you bring my money today, princess?" I met his gaze calmly. "No." His smile faltered. His friends shifted uncomfortably behind him. The hallway was filling with students, everyone sensing something was about to happen. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice low. "I said no, I'm not paying you." For a moment, silence hung between us like thick fog. Then Derek's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing into slits. "You really don't get it, do you?" he hissed, leaning so close I could see the pale freckles across his nose. "You're gonna regret this." He shoved past me roughly, his shoulder slamming into mine so hard I stumbled into the lockers. Laughter echoed down the hall as his friends followed, high-fiving each other. All day they didn't leave me alone. At lunch, Kyle accidentally knocked my books onto the floor, stepping on my notebook with his dirty sneaker. "Oops," he said, smirking down at me. In chemistry, Jake brushed past me so forcefully, my shoulder hit the lab counter, sending a shock of pain up my arm. "Watch where you're going," he sneered as he walked away. By the end of the day, my body felt bruised, but it was nothing compared to the quiet, simmering rage curling in my chest like coiled wire. When the final bell rang, I didn't leave right away. I stayed in the library, pretending to do homework, but really I was waiting. Waiting for the hallway to clear. Waiting for Derek to be alone. At 4 p.m., I finally slipped out of the library and walked across the empty courtyard toward the athletic building. Through the glass doors, I saw him leaving the locker room alone, earbuds and scrolling through his phone. I stepped out into the open. Derek. He looked up, surprised. For a second, his expression softened, like he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. Then his smirk returned. "Oh, look, Soup Girl's back." I walked closer until we stood only a few feet apart in the empty parking lot. The sun was setting behind him, casting his broad shoulders in gold. To anyone else, he would have looked invincible. But to me, he was just another opponent. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady. "About what?" He snorted, crossing his arms. Even alone, he radiated arrogance. "About yesterday in the cafeteria. What's wrong? I thought it was pretty funny. For you, maybe. Not for me." He stepped forward, towering over me. "Listen, newbie, I tried to make this easy for you. Pay up, and life goes on. But now you've made me look bad. And tomorrow, everyone's gonna know who really runs this school." I tilted my head, studying him. His stance was wide, confident, too confident. He thought I was defenseless. He had no idea. "You know what, Derek," I said, my voice strangely calm. "I have a proposition." He raised an eyebrow. "A proposition? You're not in any position to propose anything. One-on-one. Right here, right now," I said, staring directly into his eyes. "If you win, I'll pay you $10 a day instead of $5. I'll do whatever you want. But if I win, you leave me alone. Forever." For a split second, something flickered in his eyes, confusion, hesitation, then it was gone, replaced by a sneer. "You want to fight me? You're serious." He laughed harshly, looking me up and down. "I bench press 300 pounds. I've been playing football since I was 10. You're nothing." I shrugged lightly. "Then you have nothing to fear." Something in my tone made him pause. He studied me again, his smile faltering just slightly. But pride is a powerful poison. "Fine," he spat, "but don't say I didn't warn you." He dropped his backpack on the asphalt, cracking his knuckles as he stepped back into a fighting stance. I exhaled slowly, feeling every muscle in my body loosen. My mind went quiet, the world narrowing down to the fading orange sunlight, the scent of cut grass from the football field, and Derek Collins standing in front of me. This was the moment. The threshold I couldn't uncross. The day I stopped hiding, the day I showed everyone who Lena Tran really was. For a moment, everything was silent. No distant chatter from the school building, no birds, no cars passing by. Just me and Derek standing in the golden light of the setting sun, shadows stretching long across the empty parking lot. He flexed his arms, rolling his shoulders like a fighter preparing for a match. But his stance was all wrong, too stiff, too focused on power instead of balance. He had no idea what he was doing. "Last chance to back out, princess," he sneered, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. "I don't want to break you before homecoming." I tilted my head slightly, studying him with calm detachment. My pulse was steady, my breathing slow. The world felt quiet and sharp, like the moment before lightning strikes. "Thanks," I said softly, but no thanks. He lunged forward, fist cocked back in a wide telegraphed punch aimed straight for my face. The movement was so slow, it felt like I had all the time in the world. I stepped lightly to the left, letting his punch slice through empty air, and brought my right forearm up to deflect his arm away from my body. His eyes widened in confusion. Before he could recover, I pivoted my hips and snapped my left fist forward in a tight, controlled punch, driving it straight into his solar plexus. The impact was short, precise, and devastating. I felt his diaphragm spasm under my knuckles, heard the whoosh of air forced from his lungs. Saw his eyes bulge as he staggered back, clutching his chest, gasping like a drowning man. He dropped to his knees, choking on shallow, panicked breaths. His friends weren't here to help him now. There was no audience to cheer or jeer. Just me standing over him in the fading light, breathing calmly, my arms hanging loosely by my sides. "What did you—" He rasped his words, cut short by his body's refusal to obey him. I crouched down so our eyes were level. His face was pale with shock and pain, sweat beading on his forehead. "The first rule of fighting," I said quietly, "never underestimate your opponent." He tried to speak again, but his throat seized around his breath. I watched him struggle for a moment, then stood up, giving him space to breathe. "Do you know who I am, Derek?" I asked softly. His glazed eyes blinked up at me in confusion and fear. "I'm not just some new girl from Detroit." I continued, my voice calm and steady, each word sinking into his dazed mind like a nail into wood. "I'm the Michigan Junior MMA champion. 4 years of training, 23 fights, 21 wins. And the punch I just gave you, that was maybe 10% of what I can do." I let that settle in the quiet dusk. The wind picked up, ruffling my hair around my face, carrying away the sharp tang of sweat and fear. I moved here to start over, to live like a normal girl. My mom asked me to keep my skills hidden so people wouldn't be afraid of me, and I promised her I would. I crouched down again, looking him straight in the eyes. "But you didn't give me that chance. You wanted to see who I really was." "Well, now you know." He finally managed a shallow gasp, his hand still pressed to his chest. "Please don't tell anyone," I almost laughed at the irony. The king of Lincoln High begging me for mercy. "You're going to keep your end of the deal," I said quietly. "Tomorrow you will apologize to me in front of the entire school. You will leave me alone, and you will never ever lay a hand on anyone weaker than you again." He nodded frantically, tears starting to gather in his eyes from the pain and panic. "Good," I whispered. I stood up, slung my backpack over my shoulder, and walked away from him as the sun dipped below the trees, leaving the parking lot bathed in shadow. My legs felt light, almost weightless. My heart was quiet. For the first time since arriving in Maplewood, I felt like myself. But deep inside, as the last rays of daylight faded behind me, I knew this was only the beginning. Because revealing who I was meant there was no turning back. The next morning, the halls of Lincoln High buzzed like a hive. I could feel it before I even stepped inside, the way conversations died down as I passed, how eyes followed me, wide and curious. Whispers trailed behind me like smoke. "Is that her? Did you hear what happened to Derek? She took him down in one hit." "No way. He must have let her win." I kept my head down, walking to my locker, refusing to let their words touch me. I was used to whispers. I had lived with them for years, but these were different. These weren't the whispers of contempt or dismissal. They were tinged with fear and something dangerously close to awe. When I turned the corner to homeroom, Derek was standing there waiting, his shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed red from pain and sleeplessness. As I approached, the chatter around us faded into silence. He swallowed hard, glancing at the floor before looking up at me. His gray eyes were dull, all arrogance drained away. He spoke loudly, his voice cracking slightly, saying he was sorry for what he did yesterday, for everything that he'd been an idiot. You could hear a pin drop. Students stared at him in shock. Derek Collins, the untouchable king of Lincoln High, apologizing to the new girl in front of everyone. I nodded once and thanked him. He shuffled away, not meeting anyone's eyes. As he disappeared down the hall, I heard the buzz begin again, louder this time, but I ignored it. I just walked to my seat and sat down, my pulse steady and calm. But I soon realized that taking down Derek Collins was only the beginning. Because that afternoon, as I sat alone at lunch picking at my food, a group of girls approached me. Their leader was Jessica Martin, one of the most popular girls in school. Her makeup was perfect hair curled into soft waves, but her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion and fear. She hesitated, asking if they could talk to me. I looked up at her, then at the 3 girls behind her, all shifting uncomfortably, and told them sure, gesturing to the empty seats. They sat down quickly, casting glances over their shoulders to make sure no one was listening. In a whisper, Jessica asked if it was true what I did to Derek, if I was trained. I nodded once. She bit her lip, tears gathering in her eyes as she said they needed my help. I set down my fork, my chest tightening, and asked what happened. She explained there was a group of guys from West Side High, 5 of them, who waited after school by the bus stop. They hadn't done anything yet, but they said things touched them, and last week one of them grabbed her wrist when she tried to walk away. She took a shaky breath, wiping away a tear before it fell, and said they couldn't tell their parents because they just forbid them from going out and the school couldn't do anything since it wasn't on school property. Her voice broke on the last word, and I felt a familiar burn flare up in my chest, that molten, steady anger I knew so well. I asked quietly how many of them there were. 4 girls always walking together, and them 5 seniors. Big, football types. I sat back in my chair studying their pale, afraid, desperate faces. My mind spun with scenarios, techniques, risks. 5 against 1 wasn't ideal. But letting them keep living in fear wasn't an option. Finally, I told them calmly what we were going to do. As I spoke, outlining my plan, I felt something shift inside me. The girl who wanted to hide, to be invisible, to keep her promise to Mom, she was fading away. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Some promises are worth breaking, especially when it means protecting those who can't protect themselves. That afternoon, I waited by the bus stop across from Lincoln High. The sky was bruised purple with sunset, and cicadas screamed in the trees lining the cracked sidewalk. I sat on the bench pretending to read a tattered copy of The Catcher in the Rye, but my eyes were fixed on the reflection in the glass shelter. Behind me, Jessica and her friends clustered together, arms linked, whispering nervously. And then they came. 5 of them, West Side High seniors. They swaggered across the street in hoodies and varsity jackets, laughing loudly, pushing each other around like playful wolves, testing who would bite first. Their leader, a tall blonde guy with a tattoo snaking up his neck, smirked as soon as he saw Jessica. He walked straight up to her and brushed his knuckles along her cheek. She flinched back, her shoulders curling inward. "Don't be shy, princess," he crooned. "We're just being friendly." One of his friends moved behind her, cutting off her retreat. The other girls froze in place, terrified. I closed my book and stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm but loud enough to cut through their laughter. The blonde guy turned to me, annoyance flickering across his face. "Who the hell are you? I go to Lincoln," I said simply. "And these girls are my friends. Leave them alone." He chuckled, glancing at his friends as if checking to see if they were watching. "Is that right? And what if we don't?" I tilted my head slightly, studying his stance, his balance, the distance between us. He was tall, built like a linebacker, but his feet were planted too far apart, his center of gravity off. "Then I'll make you." The words came out soft, almost gentle, but something in my tone made him pause. For a second, his smirk wavered. Then he barked a laugh and lunged forward, his hand reaching for my shoulder. I stepped inside his grab, deflecting his arm with my forearm, and drove my knee up into his solar plexus. The air rushed out of his lungs in a strangled grunt. Before he could double over, I pivoted and swept his front leg out from under him. He crashed onto his back with a thud that rattled the glass shelter. His friends froze, mouths open, their eyes darting between me and their leader gasping on the pavement. I straightened, breathing evenly. My heart was calm. My hands didn't shake. "Anyone else?" I asked softly. They stepped back in unison, hauling their friend to his feet as he wheezed and coughed. No one said a word. They just turned and stumbled away into the gathering dusk. Behind me, the girls were silent. When I turned around, they stared at me with wide-eyed eyes. "Thank you, Jessica," whispered, her voice breaking. I nodded, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. "Don't thank me. Just remember, next time, stand together. Fear only works if you let it." As I walked home under the indigo sky, a quiet warmth bloomed in my chest. For the first time since moving to Maplewood, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I felt like I was finally living. The next morning, the story was everywhere. People whispered in the halls, wide-eyed, as I walked past. Some smiled at me with shy respect. Others averted their gaze like they didn't know what to do with the truth they'd heard that the quiet new girl had taken down 5 West Side seniors in under a minute. During lunch, Jessica and her friends found me at my usual corner table. They sat down without asking, their faces glowing with relief. Jessica told me softly that everyone was talking about what I did, about how I saved them. I shook my head, telling her I didn't save them, that I just reminded those boys who they really were and that they were stronger than they thought. She smiled at that, tears brimming in her eyes. Word spread fast. By the end of the week, girls I'd never spoken to before approached me in the halls, asking if I could teach them to protect themselves. At first, I hesitated. Part of me still clung to Mom's words, "Stay invisible, be normal." But another part, the deeper part, the true part, knew hiding had never kept anyone safe. So I agreed. I asked the wrestling coach if we could use the small practice gym after school. The first day, 7 girls showed up. By the end of the week, there were 20. Even a few boys joined, awkward and embarrassed at first, until they realized no one was there to judge them. We trained quietly, seriously, learning how to stand, how to fall, how to break a grip, how to strike with precision and control. But more than anything, I taught them how to breathe, how to walk through the world with their heads held high. Because real strength didn't come from punches or kicks. It came from knowing you could stand your ground and still choose kindness. But fate wasn't done testing me. One night as I walked home from the gym, the street lamps flickering in the early spring mist, a shadow stepped out from behind a parked car. My heart stilled as I recognized his face, Troy Miller's father. Thick arms, beer belly, stretching his worn flannel eyes, bloodshot with rage. He slurred at me, stumbling forward, saying I was the bitch who ruined his boy's life, that I thought I was tough, that I could hurt people and walk away. He lunged, grabbing my hoodie and yanking me forward so hard my feet scraped the pavement. Instinct took over before fear could bloom. I twisted my torso sharply, broke his grip, and drove my fist into his solar plexus with just enough force to drop him to his knees, wheezing. He coughed, spit dribbling down his chin, eyes wide with shock. He tried to rise, but his balance was gone. He collapsed onto his side, groaning. I stepped back, breathing hard, my hands trembling with cold adrenaline. I pulled out my phone and called 911, my voice calm, even as my pulse thundered in my ears. When the police arrived, they found him still on the ground, cursing and sobbing into the cracked asphalt. They questioned me, reviewed the convenience store's security footage nearby, then nodded with quiet respect, saying it was self-defense and commending me for staying calm. As I walked home under the sodium glow of streetlights, something shifted deep inside me, a realization I'd spent years running from. I wasn't dangerous because I could hurt people. I was powerful because I knew when not to. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the quiet hum of the house, I thought about all the times I'd tried to hide. All the times I'd let myself shrink just to make others comfortable. And I understood finally and completely that hiding was a choice I would never make again. Because strength wasn't just in my fists. It was in my voice, in my resolve, in my willingness to stand up for myself and others, even when my knees trembled with fear. That was the night I stopped being the girl trying to survive and became the girl who knew exactly who she was meant to be. Graduation came faster than I expected. One morning, I was just the quiet girl with her head down trying to survive the halls of Lincoln High. The next, I stood on stage in my cap and gown, clutching my diploma with trembling fingers, looking out over the sea of faces, teachers, classmates, friends, people I had once thought I'd never dare to speak to. Dear graduates, I began my voice steady carrying across the silent auditorium. 4 years ago, I came to this school thinking the only way to survive was to be invisible. I believed if no one noticed me, no one could hurt me. I paused, feeling tears burn at the corners of my eyes. I let them stay there, shining in the bright stage lights. But life has a way of finding you even when you hide, I continued. And when it does, you have a choice to keep running or to stand up and fight. My gaze swept the rows of students lingering on Jessica, who smiled at me through quiet tears, and on Derek, who gave me a small nod from where he sat among the football seniors, his eyes soft with respect and regret. I chose to fight, I said, not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I realized there are people in this world worth protecting. People who need to know it's okay to be afraid as long as you don't let fear decide who you become. The hall was silent, each word sinking deep into the hearts of those listening. I felt the moment hang in the air like a held breath. So, wherever life takes you next, I finished, don't hide who you are. Don't shrink to fit someone else's comfort. The world doesn't need more people who blend in. It needs people brave enough to stand out. I raised my diploma above my head, a quiet smile curling at my lips. Be strong, be kind, and never ever be afraid to be yourself. Applause erupted through the auditorium, loud and echoing against the high ceilings. I stepped back from the podium, my heart hammering, not with fear this time, but with fierce, quiet pride. As I walked off the stage, my mom met me at the bottom of the steps, tears streaming down her face. She pulled me into her arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. I'm so proud of you, she whispered, her voice shaking. So proud. I buried my face in her shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender soap and hospital antiseptic. Thank you, Mom, I whispered back, for letting me become who I'm meant to be. That evening, as the sun set over Maplewood, I packed my bags for Chicago, where college and a new life waited. But this time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. This time, I knew I carried it with me. Because I wasn't just Lena Tran, the new girl from Detroit, anymore. I was Lena Tran, the fighter, the teacher, the protector, and no matter where I went next, I knew I'd never again hide my light to keep others comfortable. Because strength isn't about how hard you hit. It's about how fiercely you choose to stand in your truth. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was ready to live. It's been 6 years since that day I walked out of Lincoln High with my diploma in hand and my heart wide open to the world. I'm 22 now. My hair is longer, darker, always tied up in a tight ponytail when I'm training. I still wake up before dawn, every morning still hear Master Johnson's voice in my head as I shadowbox alone in my apartment's quiet living room. Breathe, balance, control. I live in Chicago now in a small studio overlooking a noisy street lined with taquerias, laundromats, and corner stores. During the day, I study psychology focusing on adolescent trauma and recovery. At night, I teach MMA at a small gym on the south side. Most of my students are teenage girls who come in with their heads bowed, shoulders slumped, flinching when anyone speaks too loudly. They remind me of myself. When they first walk through the door, they think fighting is all fists and kicks. They want to learn how to hurt people who've hurt them, but I teach them something different. I teach them how to stand, how to breathe, how to look someone in the eye without shrinking away, and slowly, I watch them change. There's a moment I live for that split second during training when a girl lands her first clean punch on the pads and her eyes go wide with something like wonder. Like she just discovered a secret universe inside her own chest. That's why I do this. Sometimes on quiet nights after closing the gym, I walk along Lake Michigan listening to the crash of waves against the shore, the wind cold on my face. I think about Maplewood, about the girl I used to be, about Derek Collins who messaged